Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, welcome to the 52nd episode of GBR, featuring our special guest, Dale Krevens, Vice President of Tech 21, who's been there for the duration as the company celebrates 30 years in business. Now, this week's episode is brought to you by GuitarCareers, opportunities for the business of guitar. Now, this is a brand new project just launched at Winter NAMM for the purpose of facilitating opportunity pathways in the guitar universe. If your company or organization has opportunities currently available, full or part-time, freelance, gigs, temporary or contract work, well, you can get a free profile page and a free 60-day opportunity listing during their launch and ramp-up period. You'll need a promo code for that, but you can get more information and your free listing promo code at GuitarCareers.com. And if you're an opportunity seeker, and who isn't, you can check out the ops that are already posted, and you can sign up for free opportunity alerts at jobs.guitarcareers.com. That's jobs.guitarcareers.com. GuitarCareers is the only guitar-centric opportunity platform of its kind, so take a moment to check it out. There's a great FAQ that will answer a lot of your questions, again, at guitarcareers.com. So, while you're taking all that information down and planning your next move to guitarcareers.com, we're just going to have to move on to something completely different. Well, I first met Dale Krevens at Winter NAMM, I'm thinking maybe about 11 years ago. And after 30 years with Tech 21 in New York City, well, she's really become one of the icons of the business and absolutely a key factor in the success of the company she's been identified with for the last 3 decades. And at the 2019 Winter NAMM show just a couple of weeks ago, Dale was honored with a She Rocks Award presented by the Women's International Music Network. So let's find out all about it as Dale Krevens joins us right here and right now. Hey, Dale. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a long time, and welcome to GBR.
Hey, Jeff. It's great to be here. I'm really happy to be talking to you today.
Yeah. So, and we just ran into each other a few days past at NAMM, and literally running into each other and almost running past each other. So it was about a 7-second hello, how are you? And I got to run. So
very typical at NAMM shows.
I know. It was a lot of fun, though. At any rate, we always start off with something that I have routinely called foundational, and we like to know about some of those things that were really the most impactful for you growing up and ultimately contributed in some kind of significant way to getting you where you are today. Everybody has something like that. So what can you tell us?
Well, growing up, there was always music in my house. You know, my parents used to listen to a lot of jazz, Duke Ellington and Lena Horne, things like that. My mom loved to dance. And so I was always hearing music in the house and always loved it. And then when my brother, who's quite a bit older than me, he was 15, he started playing guitar. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, you know, and I even got to the point where I tried a few instruments because I wanted to be in a band with him. And, you know, I started out doing violin, which was really bad. And then I switched to drums because he had a female drummer. And I thought, that's got to be me, you know, I got to do that. But it didn't really work out so well. So I abandoned the drums. I took a piano and I said, all right, this isn't working. So I sold my piano and bought a sewing machine.
Oh, okay, that's similar.
Not exactly, but
well, it makes noise.
That's true. But I used to hang out all the band practices because they were always at my house. My parents were the only ones that would let them rehearse in the house. You know, so I was always around musicians, you know, from when I was a preteen. and, listening to guys talking about gear and their girlfriends and everything under the sun, and of course I went to every gig. I was the roadie person, and, I was always happy to walk in with the guitars. I was really proud to do it, and I loved the world. I thought it was a great world. And then as, my brother would go to different bands and different things would happen. And, I kind of said, I want to be in the music business somewhere. I was thinking about managing, but I didn't know where to start. And, somehow go to the business side of it. But I just didn't make any sense, And then I thought about, well, why don't I become a DJ?
Oh,
it's like, I wanted to be on the radio, and I said, I could play better music than all these stupid radio stations.
And you could be doing this today.
I know. It's just, and I had no shortage of ideas or things that interested me, but, nothing I could really get focused on. I was very passionate about music, but, I couldn't play it, and I couldn't write it, and I certainly couldn't sing, so I just said, I don't know. So I just said, I can't do this. I'm just going to keep, following my brother's band around and going to see other concerts and shows and, enjoy it as an audience member.
And you were, about what age at that time?
I was my teen years.
Okay, high school or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, because, the drinking age was lower back then. I won't say when. And I never got proofed, because I always came in with the band. And plus, I've always been tall, and people just assumed I was older. So
right.
It was pretty easy to get into bars and clubs and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can imagine. So were there any, were you doing anything, working or anything during those years or did you wait to get out of school, go to college, whatever?
Yeah, no, I waited to get out of school, and then I kind of, did a bunch of different things, and then I decided to go to school. I wanted to be a famous fashion designer. I went to FIT for one semester, and I said, this is a horrible business. I got to get out. It really was. It was just, I love the art of designing, but the business itself was just nasty. Talk about dog eat dog. It was
just had a lot of relatives in that business, but
yeah.
So I saw it.
I said, this isn't for me. I'll just, do stuff for myself, and maybe a few other people, but that's it. And then I got involved in the hair business. I managed a hair salon, and I said, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have my own hair salon. And then, I got sidetracked because while I was trying to get my license, I started working in marketing, and I really liked it. So my whole career path was just nonstop detours along the way. And like I said, I was interested in everything because I love to learn new things, and so I just had trouble focusing on one thing,
Sure.
But advertising and marketing seemed to be the thing that I enjoyed the most, because I could really, sink my teeth into different projects, and have fun with it, depending on the client, of course. But, I had a lot of fun clients. I was very lucky with that, and I learned a lot. I did copywriting. I did art direction. I was a stylist on photo shoots. I would interview people for certain campaigns that we did, and I just had a grand old time with it. It was never boring, and that's the thing with me, is that I get bored very easily.
Right. Now, were you working for an agency or some other kind of company at those days, or just freelancing?
No, I worked for different companies. The first marketing company, it was just a husband and wife team and me. Mm-hmm. And so I really got my hands dirty with that because it was just the three of us, and the wife didn't do a whole lot.
So it was the two of you.
No, she was really brilliant, actually. She was extremely smart, and I learned a lot from her, but she was taking care of the household, so she was in and out all the time. Mm-hmm. And then I went to another ad agency. It was also a husband and wife team, but they had a lot of interesting clients, from fashion to publishing, to some engineering stuff and some government stuff. It was a whole lot of different kinds of things, and that was really interesting. And then I went to another agency, and then I went back into marketing and then back into advertising. It was one. Kept going back and forth.
You were kind of on the same thread, just
exactly.
just working. So you did that for a while.
Yeah.
And does that lead you up to hooking up with Andrew and all that, or was there something in between?
There were probably a few other things that I'm forgetting or leaving out, or they're really not relevant. I'm not sure, or maybe all of the above.
Yeah.
But no, I was out in New Jersey visiting a friend of mine, and we were in this bar. Andrew came up to me and started talking to me. And I was like, okay. And that's why I said in my speech at the She Rocks Awards, my mother always said, you're never going to meet a nice guy in a bar. You know? I was like, but I'm a nice person and I'm in a bar. So stands to reason.
Yeah.
There would be other nice people in a bar.
Yeah.
But so, we got to talking and, and we became friends. And then, he told me about this thing he was working on because, what do you do? And at the time he was working for a music store doing repairs and modifications on amplifiers. And, he kind of had his own business within the shop,
Mm-hmm.
and, but he was working on this thing and I said, well, that's really cool. And but I kind of scratched my head and I said, how can that little box, sound like a cranked up Marshall? I'm like, there's no way. So he brought it over to my house and he plugged it into my stereo.
Right.
and he played guitar through it. And I just sat there and said, how in the world did you do that? Because as I said, with my background with my brother and his band, I knew what a cranked up Marshall sounded like. So I just said, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And then he said he was, hoping to sell the technology to, one of the bigger corporations, because he wanted to get the money to do that so he could continue to pursue a career as a guitar player. That was his dream, was to be a rock star.
Right.
Like many,
right.
So, so he went to a few NAMM shows and he shopped it around. He went to Gibson, he went to Fender, probably went to Marshall. I don't know. He went to a bunch of different places and everybody just said, no, they didn't get it. That was the thing. They didn't understand it because in those days, everything had to be a cranked up tube amp. You mention the word solid state, people go running like crazy. They're like, no, I'm not going to do it. Not going to listen. So,
and those were the days of everybody still had big cabinets and the stage presence of that sort of thing. And
exactly.
was important, right?
Yeah. Yes, very important. So, so here's this little box, mimicking all that sound and doing it really, really well. I mean, you really couldn't tell the difference, especially, you close your eyes, you're like, you can't tell the difference. So, and what does it matter if it delivers it?
Yeah,
but
exactly. People
were stubborn, or they lacked the vision to see the potential in it. So I just said, he finally was ready to give up. And I said, don't give up. I said, you have to do this.
So there really wasn't anything else at the time. Nobody had a little sort of direct box or something that would do some of those things?
No, not the way he did it. Mm-hmm. People could say, well, the Rockman was the first, but that had a very specific sound, so you knew when somebody was using that.
Was that Tom Scholz' product?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So, but, Andrew literally invented it for himself. That's what started it.
Right.
Because he would, you'd have to go to a recording studio. There's no such thing as home recording. There's no such thing as do it yourself. So you had to go to a recording studio. You had to spend all kinds of money. And, you'd block out 3 hours of time and you'd spend about 2 of those hours just setting up your gear, and trying to get the mics in the right spot, and then you come back, in a half an hour and, because tubes are always very temperamental and you'd come back and you take a little break and you come back and it's like, wow, it doesn't sound as good as it did 5 minutes ago. So you're constantly moving the mic around trying to find the sweet spot, and he said, this is crazy. There's got to be a better way. And being that he had an engineering background, he just took it upon himself. He says, I'm going to try and make something, and he did. So that was amazing. And, but then, like I said, he just wanted to sell it. And continue on his quest to become a famous guitar player. So I just said, this idea is too good. I said, you have to do it yourself. If nobody's buying it, you have to do it. And, he also had a conversation with a few other people who, were helpful in convincing him that he should do it, and he said, okay. He says, I'm going to do it, but can you help me? I said, absolutely. Are you kidding me? I'm like, this is my dream, to help, to do the marketing and to, work on this and, and wow, who knows where it's going to go. And I really had no idea where it was going to go at the time, but it seemed like a fun project,
Did you dive into it? Were you working, doing something else while this was kind of upstarting?
Yeah, no, I had a full-time great career in advertising. I was making lots of money, so I wasn't about to walk away from that too quickly. And then, so I said, all right, well, the first thing we got to do is we have to do graphics for this. We have to come up with a name, and that took many weeks.
To come up with the name of SansAmp.
Yeah, it was really funny because, he would just pace back and forth in my living room, and I would be sitting there with a pad and a pen, and I'd be, he would shout things out and I would write them down, and then I would shout things out and write them down. And this went on for days and days and days. and then I kept saying, the amp has to be in the name. We need to have amp in the name, because otherwise it needs to convey that this is an amplifier in a box, but I didn't want to call it amp in a box. I thought that was too stupid. So I kept just rolling it around in my head, and all of a sudden Sans popped into my head. And I went, SansAmp.
Without, or something like that. Huh? Yeah.
Exactly. That's French for without. Yeah. So I kind of said, all right. So I sat on it myself for 3 days. I wanted to make sure I liked it before I said something, because I didn't want to say it to him and have him say he liked it, and then me go, oh, I don't want to use that.
Yeah.
So finally I was satisfied. I was like, yeah, that's the name. That's the one, So I said it to him, and he goes, yeah, I like it. I went, cool.
All right.
So that was it.
6 months later.
Well, not quite, but, and because I was in advertising, I had access to art directors. So I got one art director, and I said, here, you need to design a logo for this. And, and then we need to design how the box is going to look and the colors and blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of how that all got pulled together.
What was did you do prototypes, and how did all that sort of come together? I mean, that's always a critical time too. Right. He already had a lot of that done, but once you're deciding to build it and make a commercial venture out of it, you got to go through some other steps. And what were those like?
Well, I mean, in the initial prototype time, before it had a name and before it had a real look to it, Andrew had showed it to a bunch of different artists, to get their opinions. And one key person was Mick Jones from Foreigner. And he really liked it, and so that was very helpful. And of course, we later had gotten a hold of him to help as an endorsement for, when we brought it out to the public. But like the first, I don't know, a few hundred, Andrew made all by himself.
Oh, yeah, well, that's how it is. That's how it's done.
Exactly. Literally they were made in the kitchen, and I was like, okay. And then eventually he hired somebody. In fact, his first employee was here until she retired. It was a really long time.
Oh, I've seen that picture too before.
Yeah. So that was great. And then, eventually had to add people.
What point, was there a point that they moved out of the kitchen?
Yes. Then he finally got office space at 1600 Broadway. He wanted to be near 48th Street, which is where all the music stores used to be.
Right.
Are no longer, sadly. So he made a batch, and he brought it over to Sam. Yeah, he brought it over to Sam Ash, and they kind of looked at it and went, sounds interesting, but not really. And so Andrew convinced them to take it on consignment, and they put it in the window, and literally within hours, Phil Collin from Def Leppard came in and bought it.
Wow.
So that was very cool. And
so did they call and order more at that point, or what? Yes, they did. That's how it works usually, right? So, wait a minute, maybe this is going to sell.
Yeah. And then when we did our first NAMM show, which was January of 91, I was still working, but I that was my vacation, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So, we had a little booth and, a little 10 by 10 and, we had everything all out there. And
it was just the one product, right?
That's all we had. Yeah. And people would look at it and go, what's that? And then you explain it to them and they look at you, all furrowed brows, saying, no, what are you kidding me? And I said, well, step over here and have, listen to the demonstration. So we had a guy doing demos and they would just stand there and suddenly their mouths would just drop open. It was great.
And so what was the result of that show? I mean, were there sort of measurable results that happened there that you can look back on and say, well, we got this or we got that? Or
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we made a lot of contacts with, the people. See, the thing is, we had some sales reps, that would go to dealers and try to sell it. And a lot of the dealers were the same way. They were very standoffish, going, no, this is crazy. Nobody's going to buy this. Everybody wants a tube amp, and we kept saying, no, you got to listen to it. But, some dealers were stubborn and they didn't, and they just said no. And so at the NAMM show, we were able to meet with a lot of consumers and, that generated a lot of interest. We sold a bunch at the show, which I know we weren't supposed to do, but we did.
Oh, you sold them and people took them home?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We brought I don't know, probably about 50 with us.
Wow.
And we sold them all.
Yeah, but they're small.
And that's true. So the people were instrumental in generating the interest to the dealers because they would call up the dealers and say, hey, do you have the Sans amp? And dealers are like, no. And then finally, they started to come around. On top of that, we met a lot of international distributors, some that we still have to this day. We've had such great long-term relationships with people. And it's really amazing to be able to say that. That we've had these international distributors since 1991. It's crazy.
What did the original Sans amp sell for when you introduced it?
I believe it was $295.
Really? Was it? And well, that was not an impediment of any kind. Obviously not, huh?
Well, it was to a degree. I mean, because some people perceived it as a quote unquote overpriced distortion pedal.
Got it.
But once they understood what it was and how much was in there and how much it could do, then nobody complained about it. I mean, it was kind of sort of the first boutique pedal, or one of the first. I don't even know.
Yeah, I would imagine. It sounds like it would have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, because nothing else ever existed like that before, to how we did it, or I should say how Andrew did it, it literally started the whole category of, amp emulation and for direct recording. I mean, that's what we always call it. We still do call it to this day. We call it tube amplifier emulation. We do not use the other popular term that was a marketing term, because technically modeling refers to digital, and we are not digital. We are analog. That's our story.
Did you call it an emulator in those days?
Yeah, we still do.
Yeah, because I've seen that. I mean, that's probably the right word.
And that's also key to why people love our stuff so much, because it has that warmth and authenticity and organic sound. It's because it's analog. Yeah. You can't get that from digital. You just can't. It's too clean. It's too precise, and in some ways there's also a little bit of latency, which is always, an issue. I mean, it's gotten way better than it used to be, but there's still a little bit there. Yeah.
So what would you, we like to talk about, milestones and challenges. What was the first significant challenge that you ran into? You think anything?
Me personally, or
well, I don't know. I mean, we're focused on Tech 21, but this is about you. So, however you want to describe it, doesn't matter to me.
Well, it's twofold. I mean, Andrew had no experience being a manufacturer. I had no experience being a manufacturer. So, I mean, being involved in such a teeny tiny company when this all started, or when I started, because that's a separate story. I mean, I eventually did leave my advertising job to join Andrew full time. But it was just like a temporary thing. You know, I had gotten laid off in a political maneuver, and I was really happy about it on the one hand. And I had 3 job offers by the next day once word got out. And I just told everybody, sit tight. I need to go do something for a little bit, you know, and I needed some time off from that world. And I wanted to help Andrew because I wanted to do a new brochure. I wanted to get more PR out. I wanted to arrange more reviews. I wanted to do a bunch of things, you know. So I kind of just said, okay, yeah, I'll come work with you for, you know, a few weeks or a month and see where it goes. And here I am.
At what point from the start, how many years into it before that happened? Was it 3 or 4 years or something like that?
Yeah, well, he officially started the company in 89, and I went there in October of 91. So, and before that, you know, he had a guy working with him and 2 assemblers and I think 1 shipping person. I mean, basically they came off the line, they went directly into a shipping box and they went directly out the door.
Right.
You know?
Right. So you started in full time in 91. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But I was there, you know, people say, oh, when did you start working? I'm like, I started before the company started.
Yeah, you were there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's the 30 years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, you know, I had to learn a lot on the fly, you know, because manufacturing, people do not understand how difficult manufacturing is. They really don't. I mean, you know, it's so easy to sit there and criticize a product, you know, and say, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that, or blah, blah, blah. Why didn't they put this in there? Blah, blah, blah. There's a whole lot of things there. And I get it. I look at products completely differently now because I understand all the little challenges. There's so many of them because, you know, parts have to be ordered in minimum quantities. And, you know, this one you have to order a minimum of 2,000, that one 10,000, this one 50, you know, so it's really hard to coordinate all of that and to get everything to arrive on time. And this has happened. Suppliers change the part, but not the part number.
Oh.
This happened to us with the SansAmp, the PSA programmable rack mount. They changed the XLRs and they came in and they didn't fit.
Oh man.
They didn't fit. And we're sitting there going, oh my God, we had so many back orders and that was the last thing that we needed to come in, and it finally arrives and it's wrong.
Oh boy.
And then what do you do? You know, you jump up and down yelling and screaming and it's like, you know, but a lot of these things are not sitting there on a shelf where they can just, you know, overnight it to you and get it the next day.
Let me go back a little bit. And I want to now ask you about, because you had the one product, you had SansAmp.
Right.
At what point was there product number 2?
That came along in 1992. We came out with the bass DI, which, you know, and at that time, bass players had very, very little to choose from. A lot of people just went a regular DI into the board or they just use an amp.
Was that direct, what was the DI stand for? Direct something?
Yeah, direct injection is what it actually stands for.
Right.
But, you know, so, or they would, you know, they'd have to lug around these big amps, you know, but they didn't have effects, quote unquote, at all. You know, there was very few out there. It was like, you know, maybe a dozen or so. So, so we made a dedicated direct box for the bass. And initially the controls were on the inside, and then people come, oh, we want the controls on the outside. We're able to turn it. And I was like, well, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
So they're on the inside. What does that mean? They were inside the box?
It was a kind of a set and forget, you know, because bass players traditionally, especially at that time, they had their sound and they didn't change it.
Does that mean they had to take the box apart and set it?
Yeah, they had to unscrew the back. Yeah. And it was kind of but again, it was a different mentality, and it was a different scene back then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was just, this was an easy solution to use with or without an amp and to record direct, but not just get a sterile, no personality sound, especially with recording.
Yeah.
So this gave it a lot of extra personality. And like I said, most bass players back then, they pretty much had one sound and they didn't really change it during a performance or even on an entire album.
Now, how did that go over?
Great. And it went over so well. That's why, 2 years later, we came out with the bass driver, which had the controls on the outside.
Oh,
and that product is still a top seller to this day.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So, so you have a lot more stuff now. Was there any? So we're still back in the 90s. Was there any additional major developments during the rest of the 90s that were notable that you can think of?
Well,
or challenges, or things that might have happened one way or the other.
Yeah, well, I mean, we kept developing the Sans Amp line, and we kept expanding it. Like the Classic is a very sophisticated box, and you kind of have to know how to use it, or take the time to understand how everything interacts with each other. So we made a simplified version called the GT2.
Okay, I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much set that almost any way, and you can't get a bad sound out of it. Whereas the Classic, if you don't know what you're doing.
Is that the one that has like the little slider controls on it or something?
The little dip switches.
Yeah.
Little tiny dip switches. That's the Classic.
Were they there from the beginning too? Was that
yes.
how it was designed? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I can see where that would be a little more complicated, right?
Right. And then, people said, oh, it's really hard to change the things and blah, blah, blah. Just use a guitar pick or the end of a pen. And, but again, it was a sophisticated, there was a lot in there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of ways to get your sound, and if you're not the kind of person who likes to twiddle and tweak, it's not for you, So that's when we came up with the GT2, which was much more simplified, and you could just choose your amp type, your mod type, and your mic placement type. It was much simpler.
So there was a point, and I may be stepping out of the time frame a little bit, but I remember seeing Tech 21 amps, and and stuff. So how did all that evolve?
Well, the amps came along in '96 actually. Mm-hmm. And, we put our technology, the Sans Amp technology, into amplifiers, which, of course, I thought was rather ironic. And
kind of.
Yeah, kind of. And I even said that to Andrew. I said, are you sure you want to make amplifiers? I mean, I don't know. This is kind of weird.
What was the logic behind it? What was the reasoning? Did they think that was there a market for that, do you think? Or?
Well, we thought there was a market for it, yes. And it was also, some people just couldn't quite, warm up to the idea that you need a pedal, a power amp, and a speaker cabinet. It was you had to gather that together, or, even going direct, some people were just not comfortable with it. It's like people who don't like to read on computers. They have to have a magazine in front of them.
Sure.
It's the same kind of idea. It's like, okay, I really like this and it sounds really great, but I want an amplifier. I'm comfortable with an amplifier. It just feels right. This is what I'm used to. And that's what I want. So we said, okay, why not? And of course, that created a lot of problems because we were on 49th and Broadway in Manhattan, and here we are trying to get cabinets up to our office. We didn't have a freight elevator, and the elevator couldn't accommodate a pallet.
So you're going up the stairs?
No. We just had to break down the pallets. And bring them, hand carry them into the elevator, bring them upstairs, hand carry them. It was just. Yeah. It was trouble. Let me tell you, it was a lot of work, So we did that, and then after we did the Trademark 60, which was the first amp that came out, that even actually offered the variety of sounds, because we took the Sans Amp technology. You could get Fender, Marshall, Mesa Boogie, Vox, all the different tones out of one amplifier. Now, some other companies claim to have been the first to do this. They were not. It was actually us who introduced it first. And but again, it's all analog. And
what did you call it? Did you call it emulation in those days? Was that part of the marketing of the amps?
Yeah, because we said that it had the SansAmp tube amplifier emulation technology in it. So anybody who was familiar with SansAmp, they got it. And people who weren't, they heard the amp, they're like, wow, this sounds really good. And we had little, settings charts that we made to put in the handle so people could just easily dial up all the different sounds and see how flexible and versatile it was,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and we stopped making them, what was it, a year and a half, 2 years ago? I can't remember. But people loved them. They just loved that amp, and then we made a smaller version. We did a trademark 10 and we did a trademark 30. And then we also came out with the Power Engine, which was also something new because people kept asking us, what amp should I use my SansAmp with? Because the thing is, when you use it with an amp, you have to kind of set it as flat as possible or go into the effect return if it has one. But if it doesn't have one, then you have to put all your settings pretty flat so that you get the benefit of the SansAmp without any additional coloration. So, we used to always recommend a clean amp, but that's what sparked the idea is like, hey, why don't we make an amp that doesn't have a preamp in it? Like the whole full range flat response idea, but make it guitar friendly, in terms of the kind of speaker. And then we added some EQ onto it, and it was a perfect match,
So what, just overall, the amp business,
mm-hmm.
how did that progress?
It progressed along really nicely, and we'd probably still be making them, but we kind of ran into a few snags. We needed to redesign the Trademark 60 if we were going to continue making it, because some of the parts that we were using, we knew were destined to become obsolete. So, we figured, all right, well, we got 6 more years of this, but we didn't want to go to the end, because then if we can't get more of those parts, then we can't fix the ones if, anything should need repair. So it was kind of...
Your status today on the amps is you're not in the amp business anymore, or...
No, we do have amps. We do make amps, but sadly we had to go overseas with it, because I mean, it got to the point where, the costs of the parts just kept going up and up and up.
Of course. Yeah.
But you can't raise the price because then nobody will buy it. So we ended up literally making practically nothing, I mean, our margins on the amplifiers were always much smaller than anything else, because there were a lot of parts in the, the speakers and the shipping and the woodworking, and, because we had all the cabinets were made in the U.S., so there's a lot of money involved in that, and it just became unsustainable. We just said we have to let this go.
Yeah. And
it was either just completely forget about it, but we found a really good supplier overseas, and so we have some bass amps, and we introduced a new Power Engine that's good for both guitar and bass.
That's just a head, or is it?
No, it's just that it's the full range flat response cabinet.
Oh, okay.
But it has EQ, and we added filters, and we added a defeatable tweeter. We added a lot of extra bells and whistles onto it, and it also has more wattage. Mm-hmm. So, and that we just introduced at the NAMM show. So the original Power Engine was very popular, and we're hoping this will.
Well, I remember what it is now. I was confusing it with something else. Yeah. Well, so let's kind of take a look at current times, and so tell me, product mix wise, sort of an overview of where you're at today. I mean, this is 30 years later, but how would you describe it? Where are you at now?
Well, we still have a lot of, a good long line of SansAmps, different varieties, for different purposes. And the fly rigs, which we came out with in 2014, are doing really well, because it's a rig in a small, compact box.
Mm-hmm.
I hate saying the word box; it sounds silly, but it's a pedal board in a pedal. That's what I like to call it.
Got it. Okay.
And
multifunction, I would imagine. So.
Absolutely, multifunction. Each one is also very multi-instrument. Because, like the acoustic fly rig, for instance, is also great with bass guitar. It's also great with electric guitar. Then we have the Richie Kotzen signature fly rig. We have a Paul Landers signature fly rig. He's from Rammstein. But the irony is that, they're known as an industrial metal band, but even though I don't consider them that because they're way too melodic and they've got such a great groove. So it kind of is a misnomer to me, but I love them. And we have country artists using the Paul Landers fly rig. I love that. I love that story.
Now, you did have some sort of individual sound focused Sans Amp pedals at one time that all of these each pedal was a different British or metal or something like that.
Oh, that was the character series.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Yeah, there were 5 of them. And
those, you don't make those anymore, are there?
No, those are going, because the fly rigs have.
Yeah, they have it all, right?
They don't all have all of them, but there's a lot of flexibility and versatility. I mean, sometimes if you don't say it on the pedal, people don't necessarily understand that it's in there, or you can get it. But the character series was, we did really well with that because it came out at the exact right time. That was like in 2008.
Yeah, they were cute little pedals too. They all had their own
cute little pedals and inexpensive. That was when the whole market in the world, just went kaput.
That's about the time that I got to know you. So it's been 10 or 11 years ago or so. But lots of things have happened. I mean, you think. So I always like to ask people who are sort of in leadership positions about their company culture. And, everyone is different. So I wanted to ask you about the culture at Tech 21, how you would describe it and what effect it has, on the overall business operations, or can you attribute an effect to it?
Well, I mean, we kind of run this company as a family, even though we're not related to each other, but we all get along great. We don't have any, hard and fast rules. We don't have conveyor belts. Nothing is automated. Everything is done by hand. And the staff is such that they really care about everything. We like I said, we don't have any hard and fast rules, or, we don't blow any whistles, and it's not the least bit corporate, or, it's not even like a typical factory.
So there's no time card punching or anything like that? Or?
There's a time clock on the computer, but
it's like the old thing we used to stick the cards in, it would stamp.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't do that. I mean, we did that a long time ago, but we don't really do that now. Yeah. Does it have an effect? I mean, does that make a positive difference in the business? It definitely does, because people are, they're enjoying the work because it's a clean, friendly environment. You know what I mean? And it's, I don't have a problem with people talking, some of them listen to music, with the earbuds and everything. We give them a lot of leeway in terms of what they can do. And so they become more productive because they're happier people. Sure. You know what I mean?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's very important.
It is, and there's a lot of, they smile. We have a lunchroom, they eat together, and they sometimes cook, for us, and it's really nice, it's just a very friendly atmosphere,
Well, that's always good to hear. And I do hear that from a lot of the folks that I talk to on the show. And maybe it's a factor of the type of business that we're in, and maybe the times that we're in.
Yeah, that probably has something to do with it. But it's also, even though I worked in a corporate structure, I mean, I used to get criticized for my large earrings and, certain things, it's like, So that's my feeling about the whole corporate culture, and the bean counting and all this other stuff. We've always been about building relationships, with the people that we work with, because we're together every single day, And it's also the artists we work with. We want long-term relationships. We don't want to just, sell somebody a piece of gear and say, oh, this is great, we sold so-and-so a thing. And it's not about that. It's about establishing a relationship, and that's why we've had such long-term relationships with our dealers, our distributors, and our suppliers. I mean, there are certain suppliers that we've had since practically day one,
Well, relationships are so much about what it's all about. I mean, it really does make a huge difference. Let me talk just a little bit, very briefly, about marketing. I just kind of want to ask you a general question. How would you describe your marketing strategy? What kinds of things seem to be the most effective for you? I mean, we're in a different age than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. What's working for you?
Well, oddly enough, Facebook is great because there's a lot of engagement and conversations and people talking back and forth. Our market tends to skew a little bit on the older side, which is, very into Facebook. Mm-hmm. So, and I try not to make every post, check this out, check that out. But, I try to make it more informative and enlightening and sometimes funny. Sometimes I just put something silly up there just to do it, because people like that sort of thing. It's like, you don't want to just keep saying, go buy this, go buy this, go buy this. It's not about that. It's like, we're having fun here. I mean, I'm having fun. I always have fun because I love what I do,
And
I have a lot of fun with the people on Facebook. A lot of people, they don't know it's me, although now everyone will know.
Well, we like to break a little news here every now and then, so maybe it'll get out. I know. I keep saying I wish somebody else could handle the social media, but the thing is, they don't know the products like I do, and they don't know what's important to say. You know what I mean? Like, what's the point that we want to bring out here? Why am I posting this? But you know that somebody who's listening to this podcast is going to contact you and say, I can do it. I'd love to do it for you, Dale.
I know. Oh man, it's too hard to give up. And it's fun. Like I said, I really enjoy talking to the people, and there's some really funny stuff goes on every now and then.
You're engaged. What about artist endorsements, signature product deals? Is that an important part of the mix for you guys at all, or still, or not?
It definitely is. Yeah. It absolutely is, because, and we try to work with artists. Well, we don't try. We work with artists that we really respect and admire and we're fans of. I mean, Andrew's a long time fan of Richie Kotzen's, and I've grown to be one because he's fabulous and the Winery Dogs are amazing. I mean, so much good music, so much great songwriting, excellent voice, and we have a real relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And we hang out together. So that's the side benefit, but the idea is that, we want to work with people that we admire and that we feel good about, not somebody who's necessarily super popular, but, maybe we're not a fan. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense, because then you can't put your full heart and soul into it. And Andrew doesn't like to do anything that he doesn't believe in. People would say, oh, why don't you make a widget? And he's like, I don't want to make a widget. There's a million of them out there. I can't bring anything new to the table, so why bother? So that's the thing. It's like, while Richie Kotzen is not a household name, he is highly respected amongst guitar players, and he's very well known in this community. Not the world at large per se, but
he's going to influence your potential customers, those who are more likely to be your customers than say somebody who's just a pop star or something like that.
Exactly. And and Andrew works really closely with the artist to make sure that he gets them what they want, and obviously make suggestions along the way. It's like, hey, how about we do this? And then the artist goes, yeah. It's a real collaboration. Same thing with Doug Pinnick from King's X. I've been a fan since the 80s, and so is Andrew. And, so getting to meet him and getting the opportunity to work with him was just crazy fabulous. It's like, couldn't be better.
Well, those are some of the side benefits of doing what we do. And I experience the same thing because doing this, I get a chance to, I've had people that I've known like you on the show, but I've also had many people that I didn't know who have quite a bit of stature in the business. And it's just a really a neat thing. So let's kind of go to the bookend, as I call it, or the kind of the end of the interview, where we talk a little bit from the perspective side of things. And I guess over 30 years or so, we've all seen enormous change in the business. And I'm asking you, I guess, as you look around now, how would you describe the state of the industry? And then, kind of the second part would be, going forward, what would be your biggest concerns and where do you see the opportunity? So maybe it's a 3-part. I don't know. If I have to come back and let you know what the second part was, but first about where do you think we are right now in a broad sense?
Well, I think the business is still quite healthy. There's been a lot of, bad PR propaganda, whatever you want to call it, about, guitar sales are, lacking. We don't have any great guitar heroes anymore. There's nothing new out there. And, I know that the, what's that thing called? The air, not the air guitar, the other one.
Guitar Hero?
The plastic one that you buy and you play along to on your TV.
Oh, yeah, I think Guitar Hero. Wasn't it Guitar Hero?
I don't think that's the name, but anyway,
I may be dating myself.
The point is that everybody thought that, people are going to use that because then you don't really have to learn how to play. And I think that, everything, there's an ebb and a flow in everything, where, okay, so that became really popular and every kid wanted to do that and it's going to kill it. Nope, they're not going to want to learn to play real guitar. And in some cases, it actually had the opposite effect. They're like, well, this is a toy. I want to learn how to really do it. Mm-hmm. So you're always going to have people, going, yes, I want to do this. And no, I don't want to do that. And, so people fluctuate just like the market fluctuates. And I think that there's no lack of interest in learning how to play guitar. And I know that, the whole singer-songwriter thing, that has had a tremendous effect and a boost on acoustic guitar sales, and the whole ukulele thing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Again, but that'll die down. And then somebody is going to come along. There's going to be some great band with some great guitar player and some great bass player, and then that's going to be the new thing. We all go through dry spells. Look at the movies. There's some really great movies. There used to be so many great movies out there, and now there's everything is just everything is meh. It's just, it's everything is mediocre, and that's the part that's annoying, So everybody makes a big deal out of things that aren't really such a big deal. So and they're doing the same thing with the guitar market. It's like it's not dying. I mean, if you get the overall sales, if you look at imports and exports and things like that, the numbers are up there. They're not falling off. It's doing very well. The only thing is that, for us, now it's like everybody and their brother makes a pedal for guitar.
Yeah, that's been happening for a while. And I don't know, I've talked to a lot of those guys, and there's a lot of them that have just come and gone, or they're just doing it in their spare time. And, but there's so many out there at this point in time. It's, how do you, as a player, where do you start? It's mind boggling, but how does that concern you from where you're at from the Tech 21 standpoint?
Well, it concerns us because obviously we make a lot of pedals. Now, granted, we have the longevity, we have the reputation, for great sound, quality products, low repair rates, stuff like that. But it still gets harder and harder to go, hey, remember us, because there's so many new things and everybody wants the new latest and greatest, and that they become popular for a while and then they die down. And we find that, a lot of people, they come back to us, which is really nice. But it in the meantime, it's still harder and harder to really put your face out there. And that's why, and actually this is where the artists come in, like you have Doug Pinnick, we have Richie Kotz, and we have Geddy Lee, and so that really draws a lot of attention. So that's where the going back to your point about how important are artists, they're very important because that's what gets people to look at you. And maybe they don't buy that particular product, but they're certainly going to look a lot harder at the other things that we have to offer.
Yeah.
So that's really good in that respect,
So how about Dale Krevens? Do you see yourself doing this for a while? At least through the end of the year?
Yeah. They're going to have to carry me out on a stretcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly where I should be because, I love business. I love running a business. I've always wanted my own business. I just couldn't decide which one, and I always wanted to be in the music business. I get to use all my skills, and I get to have a good time. It's fun. It's challenging. It's hard. It's frustrating. It's everything all in one, and it's, like I said, it's never boring.
Yeah.
It's never boring.
And by the way, this interview has not been boring at all. This has been just fantastic. I'm so happy and grateful that we could make this happen on pretty short notice. But I'm sure it was that 7 seconds that we met at NAMM that solidified the thing.
Absolutely. So. That's why, NAMM is a great thing. I love that show. A lot of manufacturers they hate it. They hate doing it. They hate talking to all the people. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Unfortunately, my ears were ringing for several days afterwards, and the loudness is always an issue. And I always keep saying every year, this was the loudest one. But,
I know. I actually think this year was louder than last year.
Yeah.
So
there were a lot of emails. There were a lot of emails coming from the NAMM higher ups with the usual warnings that did nothing. So
I didn't see the sound police once. So.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll have to do this again sometime, and I look forward to running into you for maybe more than 7 seconds the next time. But
it sounds like a movie.
Yeah. But thanks so much, Dale, for coming on.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate it.
So what did you think of the interview with Dale Krevens? We always want to hear from you, and you can do that easily through the official episode page on our website at GuitarBusinessRadio.com or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business, or email us directly at contact@GuitarBusinessRadio.com. And of course, if none of that works for you, just call us on our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. You can do that right now if you like, or later. Operators are standing around. Give them a call so they have something to do. Now, I have to say that doing this interview with Dale was a lot of fun. It was like we were just across the table from one another, but the table was like 3,000 miles long or something like that. It may not be the best analogy, but you know what I mean. It's the miracle of Skype. And, a lot of the folks that we've had on GBR here have had long careers in the business and have accomplished and experienced a lot. Oftentimes, we get into talking about earlier times that most of us remember, sort of. I mean, some of it's definitely a blur now, but, the general ideas and images are still pretty clear. And for most of us that have been around a while, we have seen enormous changes. That may be the understatement of the century, I'm afraid. It's kind of mind-boggling. It's hard to even comprehend unless, that's what you do for a living or hobby or something. Then maybe you might have a better grasp of it. But, on the surface, it seems to me that most people have adapted to change one way or another. Some more than others. I mean, I certainly feel like I have, but of course, I'm biased. I only see it from my perspective, but I don't think change is slowing down. I think, in fact, it's speeding up. And I'm kind of wondering what that means. What are the implications? I don't think it's getting easier to keep up with change the older we get, although I'm trying every day. And I'm in a business that requires me to be up to date. So what's the solution? Well, I think it's something I've talked a lot about here. It's the title of my upcoming book, Resimplification, which may be out toward the end of this year or next, whichever comes later. Now, my contention is that you can simplify your business, your work, or your life and not necessarily sacrifice the quality and richness that most of us seek. But it just stands to reason that in a fast-changing environment, the fewer things that you have to keep up with and adapt to, the easier it is. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is for everybody, because some people just thrive on complexity and can sort through it with some kind of seemingly mythological power. But for most, focusing on fewer destinations usually yields more satisfying outcomes. So I would just say that if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with change, it may just be that too many things in your life are changing too fast. Maybe it's time to re-simplify. And if that's the case, the advice I would give you is always the same. Stay positive. Stay focused on your destination or destinations, but remember to keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 53. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.